Vidhammer Fantasy.
Back at Learn to Play Games up in Lutz, and I'm going to take my Skaven, go up against Robbies Warriors of Chaos. I've got my Plague-themed list, and he's got an I have no idea how themed list. See how it works out. Let's do this. Before game starts, I will give you a rundown of my list. I'm taking Lord Skrolk for this one. Thing to remember is Liber Babonicus. You can get that spell off. It's power level 6 bound spell that I've got. It's a nice one. Gotta remember that it's there. I've got another Plague Priest, level 2. Got the Dispel Scroll, and I must remember Potion of Toughness. I'm on the Plague Furnace, but once I get into combat, the guy's only toughness 5, has got no armor, but for one turn I'll at least be tough. Gotta remember to use it. The Chieftain is the BSB, got Standard of Discipline, so I got +1 leadership. I put him in my other unit of Plague Monks with Skrolk. That way I can bubble out leadership 8 plus ranks. So up to leadership 11. Works nice. Got the two Plague Monk units, both 35. One has Banner of Swiftness. This should be the one with the Plague Furnace. Make sure to get into combat, get the impact hits for it. I got 40 slaves, typical slave block. 2 blocks of 35 clan rats, both with the Poison Wind Mortar weapon team. Be nice. No armor saves, all that good stuff. 2 units of giant rats. 2 Plague Claw catapults, which are going to be proxied with the Warp Lightning cannons. Poison Wind Globadiers, 8 of them, with a Poison Wind Mortar weapon team. So I'm going to have 3 Poison Wind Mortars and 2 Plague Claw catapults in my shooting phase. Be nice when they would come off. And then 12 Plague Sensor Bearers. If I can get them in the right spot at the right time, they might do good. My downfall with Plague Sensor Bearers, they never stay alive long enough to get into combat and actually do their attacks. Initiative 3. See if I can pull it off. For a quick rundown of Robbie's list, he's got a Chaos Lord of Tzeench on the Disc of Tzeench, Hellfire Sword, so no armor saves, and yeah, bad wounds, flaming, all that good stuff. Talisman of Endurance, Scaled Skin, Soul Feeder, and Third Eye of Tzeench. So yeah, 1+ armor, 4+ ward save, reroll the 1s, and a chance of regaining wounds that you lose. Nice. Exalted Hero of Tzeench, BSB, on a Chaos Steed, Talisman of Preservation, Iron Curse Icon, and Burning Body for the flaming attacks, 1+, 3+. Always nice when you can have those. Chaos Sorcerer of Tzeench, Enchanted Shield, Talisman of Protection, Chaos Familiar for the extra channeling, and Lore of Metal, which does some very nasty stuff. It's only a level 2, though, which turns out being okay, and that's his only caster. Then he's got Warriors of Tzeench, 19, 2 Tzeench Chariots, because Tzeench is his entire theme for this army. 8 Chaos Knights of Tzeench, with 1 Doom Knight and the Banner of Swiftness for +1 movement. The Chaos War Shrine, which will be the Eye of the Gods, since he has 1 unit of 15 Chosen of Tzeench, with the champion, standard, musician, all that good stuff. And 2 units of 5 Chaos Warhounds.
We roll for a scenario and get Watchtower, so we roll again and get Blood and Glory. It's relatively even, as I have 7 Fortitude points and Robbie has 6. Next up, Scenery, with the upper central piece being an Arcane Ruins, a Temple of Skulls in the upper right, an Anvil of Vol in the lower left, and our 2 buildings end up being a Dwarven Brewhouse and a Grail Chapel. And since we thought that the Stubborn bonus from the Brewhouse was only for the forces of good, we play both structures as ordinary buildings for this game. As for the skull in the center, it's a haunted mansion this time, because Robbie really loves those things. I win the roll for board edge, and elect to set up on the left side just to keep the Anvil of Vol away from my opponent. I start off deployment with some giant rats, realizing that these are actually Clan Molder, but hey, I need to have some chaff after all. We go ahead and roll for our spells, with my level 2 getting Cloud of Corruption and Wither, while Skrolk gets Pestilent Breath, blessed with Filth and Plague. Robbie's caster ends up with Final Transmutation and Enchanted Blades of Iban. Also, the Chosen pick up +1 toughness from their Eye of the Gods roll. He places a couple of chariots, and I put down some clan rats with poison wind mortars and eventually my plague claw catapults. He finally puts down his Chaos Warrior unit, so I throw down my Plague Monk block with a suspicious-looking space in the center. As I put down my other Plague Monk block, he puts his Chosen across from it, so I place my slaves on the opposite side of this impassable terrain, and as long as I can remember to keep Skrulk close by, then I should be able to keep my forces from being flanked from this side at least, and I should have enough room for my Plague Censer Bearers in between. Robbie follows up with his characters, the Chaos Lord of Tzeench on his disc at the front of his line, his exalted hero BSB rides along with the cavalry, and his Sorcerer Lord goes down with his block of warriors. For my characters, the level 2 Plague Priest goes on the Plague Furnace in that suspicious gap. Skrulk and the BSB go with the Central Plague Monks. Robbie makes his Vanguard moves and starts out inadvertently cheating till I remind him that you can't get closer than 12 inches. That's what she said. He wins the first turn roll and starts out moving his stuff up. I've got dogs right in the grill of my frenzied monks. There's some chariots that are always hard to deal with when you have a Strength 3 army and no great weapons. And then there's his cavalry block that I've got to blow out quickly before his infantry blocks make it into action. Our first magic phase ends up 8 versus 5. He starts out using 6 dice for final transmutation on my Plague Monks, which I just can't have happening at any point, really. So I use my Dispel Scroll on the first spell of the game. He uses the last 2 to attempt the War Shrine's Bound spell, but I dispel with my 5, and with no shooting for the Chaos side, we switch over. I have my Plague Monks restrain from this round, so I can move my more expendable units up to take those chariot charges. I have some clan rats and a giant rat unit charge the lower dog unit, while the slaves charge the upper one. I try to move up the silly Poison Wind Globadiers since they only have a range of 8 inches. Interestingly though, I know they can fire into combat, but we were unsure if you actually had to be in range of the enemy unit in the combat, or if you could just throw them into the back of your own unit. But that idea seemed a little far-fetched, so we didn't go with it. My magic phase is 8 versus 6, and I have range for a few things. I used the first 3 to cast Wither on the dogs, just to see if he would throw some dice at it, but he didn't bite. With the last 5, I go for Skrulk's Bound spell, Liber Bubonicus, that makes a unit within 24 inches suffer a variable number of wounds that don't allow armor saves. But I show my usual colors and roll 3 ones, and he bites down on that one with all he had. Now it's time for some shooting. All of these weapon teams and catapults deny armor saves, so the damage potential is quite high. Both catapults shoot for the cavalry and get direct hits. Unfortunately, at Strength 2, the first only manages a wound on the BSB, who shrugs it off with a ward save, but the second ends up getting 3 total. I shoot the first 2 mortar teams at the Chosen, with the first getting 3 wounds and the second drifting off, and the last fires at the Chaos Warriors in the building, but not getting any wounds. Finally, the Globadiers lob into the combat, but only manage to hit my units after the randomization and kill off one of my giant rats. We play out the lower multi-combat first, where the dogs are toughness 2, and my units still only manage a single wound. Thankfully, the clan rats manage to save a couple of wounds, so the dogs still need Snake Eyes for the break test, which is good since he actually rolled a 3. But they do break, and the clan rats catch them in the pursuit. The upper combat doesn't go my way, and although I do win the combat with the charge in ranks, it's not by enough, and they pass their break test. This sucks in a big way, because now the cavalry are going to get a broadside, and the slaves aren't going to last nearly as long as I had hoped. Several charges come into play this round, starting with the 2 chariots charging the Poison Wind Mortar at the bottom. This is not so good, because I realize that when he overruns into the clan rats, I'm not going to be able to charge them with my Plague Furnace because I move the Poison Wind Globadiers up, and they're going to block them from being able to close the door. Otherwise, the Sorcerer charges the Plague Censer Bearers, but since they form up, they end up outside of the charge distance. But the cavalry managed to squeak by the giant rats to hit the slaves in the flank. For other moves, the Chosen reversed their course as the warriors pop back out of the building. Magic is again 8 versus 5. He uses his first 3 dice for enchanted blades on his cavalry to give them +1 to hit, and knowing that final transmutation is probably coming, I let this one go, figuring that there isn't much I can do to save the slaves anyway. And he does use his 5 remaining dice for final transmutation and gets irresistible. So I lose 11 Plague Monks, which is a bit of a sting, but at least he loses his 2 wizard levels in the backlash, and he doesn't have any offensive spells left. For combat, the chariots kill off the mortar and impact hits and overrun safely into the clan rats. In the upper combat, I end up losing 8 slaves altogether, and even though he has a full rank in my flank, so I don't get to count my ranks, they are within range of the BSB and General Scroll, so they still manage to pass their break test as we head over to my turn. The Plague Censer Bearers manage to refrain from having to attempt a very long charge, but then we roll for the Haunted Mansion in the middle, and the giant rats take a wound, forcing a panic test, which they fail and run, but they ended up heading for the Chosen, which is where they were going to go anyways. I can't manage any charges this round, so I just try to move things out of my own way, so I might be able to do something next turn. Magic is 5 versus 3 for me, and I use all 5 for Liber Babonicus on the cavalry, with irresistible force, and although I don't know if the spell would be lost or not, it didn't really matter since I'm probably never going to cast this spell again, as it did 0 wounds. Which is a bit like my shooting, as neither catapult does a darn thing while shooting for the Chosen and the warriors. Both remaining mortars aim for the Chosen and also get nothing, so I'm feeling good about that. I'm sure combat will make me feel better. I try to have the slaves kill off the single remaining dog, and they still can't manage to do it. Not a single wound. But 11 of them manage to die, so at least they're good at that. Half of me is hoping that they explode at this point, but they manage to pass one more time. For the lower combat, clan rats lose a few, but remain steadfast and pass the break test. They would probably be able to hold out till the furnace got there if he wasn't about to charge another chariot into them. The Sea of Red comes out as Robbie charges. Warriors charge the clan rats, and I think about it for a bit, but I go ahead and have these guys flee. And of course the sorcerer charges them and they flee off the board. The Chosen charge into the giant rats as the Chaos Warriors redirect into the Plague Monks, but fail the distance. And finally, the second chariot joins in on the lower clan rats. In combat, the lower clan rats do end up having a complete rank after the deaths, so they're steadfast. But I would have needed 6 supporting ranks to help me pass the break test, since I was kind enough to roll 11 on this round. So they flee and manage to escape, but both of the chariots are able to make it well out of the charge arc of the furnace, which is a totally unused weapon so far. For the upper combat, slaves finally managed to kill off a single dog. Congratulations, only took you 3 rounds. Sadly, however, they lose enough to the cavalry that they only have 9 models left, so I'm no longer steadfast, and they fail the Snake Eyes break test and explode, but don't manage any further wounds. On to my turn, I have the Plague Censer Bearers charge the Eye of the Gods. The Plague Furnace is able to make the distance into the Chaos Warriors, so maybe one fight will go my way this time. The poor fleeing clan rats manage to rally and turn back around for another wave of impact hits. Globadiers and Mortar move up to try and do some good before they're gone. Magic is 7 versus 5, and I use the first 4 for Plague on his cavalry, and he rolls all 5 of his dice to dispel that one, so I use my remaining 3 for Wither on the warriors, trying to make that combat over in one shot. Shooting is once again far less than spectacular, with one catapult drifting off into nothing, and the second one being kind enough to kill off one of my mortars before it can fire. The remaining mortar hits the Chosen for a single wound, followed by the Globadiers in all of their glory, getting 1 more, because I roll like a champ. For the first combat, my marvelous Plague Censer Bearers manage a single wound, while taking 3 in return, and since one of my own guys was nice enough to die to the fumes, I end up failing the break test. But if the sensor bearers know how to do one thing, it's running like a bitch, and they get away big time. The Plague Furnace, on the other hand, scores a single wound from its fog effect, and only 1 in impact hits. Then his character issues a challenge, and my unit champion goes ahead and accepts this one. My guy's actually able to dodge the wounds and put one back in return. Go, little buddy. Although my rank and file guys only manage a single wound, and they take a couple in return from my warriors, I'm hoping for a big hit from the furnace, but I only manage a single wound since he makes a couple of saves. Fortunately, with the charge in ranks, I end up winning the combat by 6, and he isn't steadfast. He fails the break test and gets cut down as he runs, but I do offer up my rear to his chosen, as bad as that sounds. Another Sea of Red as Robbie does his charges again. One chariot charges the clan rats, while the other opts to go for the catapult, while the sorcerer pulls a dick move and charges the other one. The chosen make it into the plague monk's rear because they go that way, as the chariot makes a move on my remaining mortar. I have it flee, and he tries to redirect into my globadiers just because he wants a complete slate this round, but he doesn't pass the check and it has to settle with running down the mortar. For combats, the lower chariot manages to take the clan rats down to only 4 remaining models, but they actually get away on a 6-inch flee range, and they end up just short on the board with the chariot on their heels. The second chariot takes out the catapult and turns around. In the big combat, I don't manage a single wound to the toughness 5 chosen, with the wrecker being out of combat, and I lose 8 myself. The unit is still unbreakable, but without the ability to turn around, that's just an inevitable loss. Back to my side, the sensor bearers manage to rally and turn towards some action as I forget about that lower chariot pointed my way. The other fleeing clan rats don't manage a rally and run off the board. It's probably for the best from their point of view. The only thing I have left are my Skrulk monks, which charge the Eye of the Gods, and it runs away. I also make a silly move of the globadiers toward his chosen, but Robbie's trouncing me enough that he let me change their position so I can actually hit the Eye of the Gods. I'm not sure what happened in Magic here, but with no mention of it being found, I can only assume that nothing of note really happened. I'm fairly certain Skrulk lost a couple of spells in that most recent backlash, though. The globadiers do manage to pull a wound on the Eye of the Gods, so it's actually a successful shooting phase compared to some of my earlier ones. Combat, not so much. Even though I only lose 3 plague monks in the combat, I'm still unable to reform amid defeat, and the censor won't be able to move much longer. For the top of turn 5, Robbie decides to triple team my central plague monks. The Lore Shrine rallies as the chariots do something down at the bottom. I'm not really sure it's going to make a difference, though. As we do our central big combat, he issues a challenge, and I have Skrulk accept, who actually manages to get in some hits, so it forces the toughness test or die. But he passes and kills off Skrulk for a good measure. I don't count how many models I lost or to what source I lost them, but I do know that I lost a lot of guys, and with my general out, things don't look good. Luckily though, I still had the BSB hanging around for now, so I'm able to pass the break test on a rerollable 6. The furnace combat ends up much like it's been going so far. I don't do diddly squat, I lose several guys to the chosen, and I end up with not enough models to move the furnace even if I was able to. For my final turn, I really only have one chance of winning a combat, and that's to have the Plague Sensor Bearers make the long charge into the Chosen's rear. Insert humorous comment about the Chosen being in the middle, but the Sensor Bearers need an 11, and if you know me by now, you know I'm not making that one. I don't even know what happened in the magic at this point, but the only person who can cast doesn't have anything in his arc anyway, so oh well. Globadiers manage another wound on the eye, but he saves it just to give me another ineffective shooting phase. We could do our actual combats at this point, but there isn't really a need. I know I'm going to lose both of those units, so this is a complete tabling of my army over the final turn, with only a block of Chaos Warriors to show for it. My only final thoughts for this game are relatively simple. Skaven shooting is awesome as long as I'm not rolling the dice, and treat the Plague Furnace like a prison shower room. Just don't let anyone get behind you. Hope you like this battle report. Be sure and check back for more videos each week. Do me a favor and subscribe, like the video if you want to see more, and leave a comment if you have any matchups or tactics you'd like to see. Check us out on Facebook and Twitter, and until next time, this is Spudlow saying, keep fighting.